The aroma of home-cooked food filled the cozy atmosphere of the restaurant, mingling with the sounds of animated conversations and the clinking of silverware. It was the kind of place where families gathered for celebrations, quiet dinners, and carefree laughter, a perfect reflection of the small community from which Camilla Grant and her family came. Camilla, seated at a table near the window, watched her son, Logan, distractedly playing with crayons and a sheet of paper. The boy was drawing haphazard shapes with the typical concentration of 5-year-olds, and Camilla smiled, letting out a light sigh. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to relax. But that moment was interrupted by the sound of high heels echoing on the polished wooden floor. Victoria Barners, her younger sister, approached with the grace of someone used to having all eyes on her. In her fitted cream-colored dress and meticulously styled hair, Victoria stood out as an elegant, almost untouchable figure, contrasting with Camilla's casual appearance, which bore a visibly tired air. Victoria's wedding was just days away, and the preparations were in full swing. It seemed that the pre-wedding jitters made her energy even more electric and intense. "Camilla, sorry for the delay. I got caught up with another detail for the catering. You know how it is, every little choice makes all the difference." Victoria flashed a wide smile that didn't reach her eyes before leaning in to hug her sister. "And how's my favorite little man doing today?" she asked, turning her attention to Logan. Logan looked up and gave his aunt a shy smile. "I'm drawing a dinosaur, Aunt Vicky." "He's going to your wedding," he declared enthusiastically, proudly holding up the scribbled paper. "Oh, of course. I'd love to have a dinosaur at my wedding," Victoria laughed lightly, sitting down and crossing her legs elegantly. But soon her gaze found Camilla's, and her expression turned more serious. "We need to talk about the flower arrangements. I was thinking white orchids for the guest tables, but I'm not sure if they'll go with the yellow tulips at the ceremony. What do you think?" Camilla blinked, a bit surprised by how quickly Victoria had dived into the details. She picked up the menu, more to keep herself occupied than to choose something. "Maybe something simpler would work better, Vicky," Camilla began, cautiously. "Lilies or even roses. It doesn't have to be so extravagant, you know? What matters is the meaning, not the luxury." Victoria narrowed her eyes, and her smile became more rigid. "Camilla, you know I've waited my whole life for this day. I'm not compromising on anything. Besides," she glanced around, as if fearing to be overheard, "after everything we've been through, we need a reason to truly smile. We need perfection, and that's what I'm going to have." Camilla nodded slowly. There was something in Victoria's tone that had always seemed impenetrable to her, a mix of determination and coldness that sometimes left her unsettled. Victoria seemed to be on a mission to have the perfect wedding, as if it were a correction for every pain and every past failure. "I understand, but sometimes the simplest things are the most beautiful." Camilla tried to argue, but she realized that Victoria was already distracted, scrolling through her phone for pictures of potential floral combinations. Before she could insist on the subject, the sound of a door opening caught both their attention. Michael Grant, Camilla's husband, entered the restaurant. There was something different about him that night. His dark hair was messy, and he seemed distracted, almost bothered. Michael hesitated for a moment upon seeing the sisters before forcing a smile and making his way to the table. "Sorry for the delay. Work was a mess today." He leaned down to give Camilla a quick, somewhat mechanical kiss before ruffling Logan's hair. "Hey, champ. Shouldn't you be in bed by now? I came to help Aunt Vicky choose the wedding flowers," Logan replied proudly, puffing out his chest. Michael smiled, but it was a short smile that didn't reach his eyes. He exchanged a quick glance with Victoria, one of those looks laden with an unspoken message, a spark of mutual understanding. Camilla noticed but chose to ignore it, attributing it to fatigue. She didn't want to start questioning everything all over again. She already had too much to worry about. "Well, it looks like you're very busy here, champ," Michael said, trying to relax his posture. "But maybe it's time we head home, don't you think?" Victoria let out a low chuckle, crossing her arms. "Oh, Michael, you're always so protective. Let him enjoy a little longer. It's still early, and he's so happy. It'll be good for him." Michael frowned, but soon sighed and turned to Camilla. "What do you think?" Before Camilla could respond, Victoria interjected once again, her smile sharp as a blade. "By the way, how about you and I go together tomorrow to choose the gifts for the groomsmen, Michael? I still haven't decided whether to personalize them or not." Michael seemed to hesitate for a second, but soon nodded. "Sure, Vicky. Tomorrow morning, then." Camilla watched in silence. There was something about that conversation, the way Michael adjusted to Victoria's presence, that left a bitter taste in her mouth. But once again, she pushed the thought aside. It was just more wedding preparations, right? However, something deep in her heart was already beginning to break, even though she didn't know it yet. Something that, silently and painfully, would pave the way for a devastating event long before the altar lights were lit and the bouquet was thrown. And at that moment, none of them could imagine that in just 16 days, the laughter shared that night would become distant memories. And what today seemed like just an ordinary family dinner would transform into a prelude to a tragic and irreversible nightmare. It was a sunny weekend, one of those perfect days for a family trip. Camilla, Michael, and Logan were planning a quick getaway to the countryside, a brief moment of rest before Victoria's wedding. Michael, usually careful, was driving while Camilla gazed out the window, lost in thought. Logan's cheerful voice filled the car as he quietly sang a children's tune. But then, everything changed in a matter of seconds. A blaring horn cut through the air, and suddenly, the things that made sense no longer did. A blur of lights and the sound of twisting metal was all Camilla remembered before being swallowed by darkness. When she opened her eyes again, the silence was deafening. In the hospital, the cold, white room was almost empty, except for the monotonous sound of the monitors. Camilla opened her eyes with effort, feeling each part of her body heavy and distant, as if she were trapped in a nightmare. The first thing she saw was the anxious look of the nurse beside her and the indistinct shadow of her parents in the corner of the room. Diane, her mother, was silently sobbing, her face contorted in a mask of restrained agony. John, her father, seemed smaller, as if the weight of the world had fallen on his shoulders all at once. "Mom?" Camilla murmured, her voice coming out raspy. Her body ached, but it was a kind of pain that came from deep within her soul, something she couldn't identify. What happened?" Diane moved closer, gripping her daughter's hand tightly, as if that could prevent her from crumbling. "Camilla, dear, there was an accident." Her voice was a trembling whisper. "Michael and..." Her throat tightened, and for a moment all that could be heard were the regular sounds of the machines. "Logan?" They didn't. Tears flowed silently down her mother's face, and then Camilla felt her world collapse. "Logan?" The name reverberated like a knife stabbed in her chest. No, it couldn't be true. No, this can't be. The scream formed inside her but didn't come out. It felt like she was suffocating, but no one could hear her. The pain of losing Michael was instantaneous and devastating, but the deeper blow was Logan, her little boy, her only child, the one she promised to protect with her very life. Despair consumed her, tears burning on her skin as consciousness slipped away once more. The following days were a dense fog of pain and disbelief. The funeral took place while Camilla was still hospitalized, unable to move, speak, or comprehend the magnitude of the loss. When she finally found the strength to leave the hospital, she faced the overwhelming emptiness of the house, every corner filled with memories. Toys left behind, clothes still scattered in the bedroom, dinosaur drawings stuck to the refrigerator. Nothing felt real. With each passing day, reality dragged her deeper into the abyss of grief. It was then that, in a moment of desperation, Camilla sought out Victoria. Deep down, she needed something to hold on to, an anchor to prevent her from being completely swallowed by the pain. Victoria welcomed her into her home, a tense and uncomfortable smile on her lips. The wedding preparations were still evident in every corner. Invitations on the table, fabric samples scattered across the sofa, a cruel contrast to the recent tragedy. "Victoria, please." Camilla began, her voice fragile and trembling. "I need you to cancel the wedding. I can't handle this right now. Not after everything." The words tumbled out, the latent pain in each syllable. Victoria looked away, biting her lower lip. There was something almost irritated in her posture, as if she were hearing an irrational request. "Camilla, I'm so sorry for what happened, you know that." She moved closer, her hands coming together in an anxious gesture. "But I can't." She hesitated, glancing at the shining ring on her finger as if it gave her strength. "I can't sacrifice my big day. We're so close, there's so much in motion, and I need you to understand that I—" Camilla stood frozen. For a moment, she thought she had heard. Those words sounded so cold and insensitive, coming from someone who was supposed to be her biggest ally. It was like a treacherous blow, something so out of context that her mind simply couldn't process it. Sacrifice. Camilla's voice came out low, almost a whisper. "Victoria, I've lost my husband and my son. How can you even think about that?" The disbelief and pain intertwined in her voice, but Victoria didn't back down. She sighed impatiently. "I understand your pain, Camilla. Really." Victoria's words were like sharp blades, spoken softly but cutting to the core. "But I've been planning this wedding for years. I can't just stop everything now. It's not fair to me. And I also need something to move forward." The silence that followed was deafening. Camilla looked at her sister, but she no longer saw the same woman she had grown up with and shared dreams and confidences. Victoria seemed like a stranger, a person obsessed with a fantasy of perfection at any cost. The pain transformed into something else, a bitter taste of anger and indignation that burned within her. "Nothing will sacrifice my big day." Victoria's words echoed through the room, sealing an abyss between them. It was as if an invisible barrier had risen, irreparably dividing the two. With her eyes fixed on Victoria's, Camilla simply nodded slowly. There was something in her expression that unsettled her younger sister, something unbreakable, almost threatening. But Victoria ignored the discomfort. "All right, Vicky," Camilla finally murmured, stepping back as if saying goodbye to a ghost. "Make your day the best of all. Because it will be the last time I'll truly be there." Camilla's gaze, empty and lifeless, left Victoria disconcerted. The older sister turned and left the house without saying another word, her slender and shattered figure disappearing into the cold night. When the door closed behind her, Victoria let out a shaky sigh. Deep down, there was a twinge of doubt. But she pushed the thought away, focusing again on the wedding details. That would indeed be an unforgettable day. Little did she know that these words would define the fate of everyone in that room, and that the wedding day would forever be marked, not by beauty or happiness, but by something she would never be able to erase. So far, we have witnessed the beginning of a story marked by joy that, in an instant, transforms into a devastating tragedy. Camilla Grant lost everything she held most dear, her husband, Michael, and her son, Logan, in a terrible accident. When she sought support from the person she loved most, her sister Victoria, she received a ruthless response. "Nothing will sacrifice my big day." Now, we want to know from you. What would you do in Camilla's place? How would you deal with such deep pain and the lack of support from those who should be by your side? Leave a comment below with your thoughts, and don't forget to like and subscribe to follow the conclusion of this story full of emotions and revelations. The preparations for Victoria's wedding had invaded the Barners' home, transforming what should have been a family sanctuary into a frenzied production studio. Fresh flowers were delivered by the truckload, each bouquet a symbol of joy that seemed to mock Camilla's pain. Layered cakes were meticulously decorated, each tier a promise of happiness that the elder sister could no longer imagine. The final details of the reception were adjusted with surgical precision, while life pulsed around Camilla like a distant echo, a scene from which she no longer felt a part. Camilla retreated, creating a refuge in her bedroom, where the echoes of the life that once surrounded her became unbearable. The house, once filled with laughter and excitement, had now become a battlefield between joy and despair. She found herself surrounded by photos depicting happy moments, images from a time when life was simpler, and her biggest concerns were choosing what to wear or where to go as a family. But now, these memories were like sharp knives, stabbing at her heart every time reality struck. The nights became endless, filled with confusing thoughts that prevented her from finding peace. Camilla spent hours staring at the ceiling, recalling fragments of conversations that once seemed harmless, but now weighed like rocks on her heart. The strange phone calls Michael made in the weeks leading up to the accident began to make sense, transforming into shadows that followed her. She remembered furtive glances between Michael and Victoria, hurried whispers that ended as soon as she entered the room. What had once seemed like just a natural concern of sisters was now a sign of something much more sinister. During this period of isolation, Camilla also began to reevaluate Victoria's behavior. Although her sister was immersed in wedding preparations, there was something in the air, a nonverbal tension, an energy that seemed to pulse with every interaction. Victoria was trying hard to maintain appearances, but to Camilla, the facade was crumbling. The laughter that had once been joyful now sounded hollow, as if they were acting in a play where true pain could not be mentioned. Every laugh that escaped Victoria's lips seemed like a provocation, a way to ignore the devastation surrounding their lives. On a sunny day, while watching Victoria animatedly chat with the vendors, Camilla caught a glimpse of how things were changing. She sat on the porch of the house where the wind blew softly, but the breeze couldn't lift the weight she felt on her shoulders. Camilla pulled up a chair and, with her head in her hands, allowed the tears to flow freely. It was a moment of raw vulnerability, a silent scream from a heart struggling to find purpose amid the pain. It was then, on a day thick with clouds and foreboding, that Camilla encountered Henry Thompson, a family friend who had always been a support in difficult times. He had noticed her absence and, concerned, came to her house. The two sat on the porch, and Camilla opened up to him, her words spilling out in a whirlwind of emotion. "Henry, you know," Camilla began, her voice choked. "I feel like something isn't right. Michael, he was acting strangely before the accident. And now, Victoria." Her voice faltered as despair enveloped her like a heavy cloak. "I don't know what to think. I feel like there's something hidden." Henry listened intently, his expression turning grave as her words echoed in his mind. He had always been perceptive, an attentive observer of family dynamics. When Camilla finished speaking, he leaned forward, his eyes fixed on hers. "Camilla, you may not be alone in this. Victoria's behavior has been peculiar, to say the least." The seriousness in his voice made each word carry immense weight. "Let's investigate. We need to uncover the truth." Henry's proposal ignited a small spark of hope in Camilla. Together, they began piecing together the puzzle that was her life, embarking on a quest that would reveal unsettling truths. They spoke to people who had been close to Michael in the weeks leading up to the accident, and the conversations uncovered disturbing details. A coworker mentioned a meeting he had with a friend Victoria didn't know. A neighbor commented on a fight he had witnessed between the couple weeks prior. Each new piece of information was a gut punch, but at the same time, it fueled Camilla's determination to uncover the truth. Meanwhile, Victoria's big day approached rapidly, and the tension mounted. The house was filled with flowers and rehearsals, but Camilla remained on constant alert, paying attention to her sister and Henry's movements. The wedding day was marked on the calendar, but for Camilla it represented something far different, a silent battle between pain and truth. Camilla felt as if she were in a labyrinth, surrounded by illusions of joy and happiness. And so, amid grand preparations and forced smiles, a silent battle unfolded, with Camilla determined to confront whatever lay hidden in the shadows. Her quest for answers became an obsession, and with each passing day, the line between mourning and investigation grew increasingly thin. She could not allow the memory of her son and husband to be tainted by lies. The echoes of her pain mingled with the sounds of the approaching celebration, and Camilla knew that sooner or later, the truth would come to light. But what she discovered could change everything. Not just for her, but for the entire Barners family. And as the big day approached, the tension in the air became palpable, like a storm ready to erupt. The long-awaited day finally arrived, and the atmosphere was charged with emotion. The Barners banquet hall sparkled with a splendor that reflected the hopes of a new beginning for Victoria. The guests, all wearing radiant smiles and light hearts, celebrated a union that promised happiness and love. The tables were elegantly adorned with fresh flowers, and the soft glow of the chandeliers created a magical ambiance. At the center of it all, Victoria looked stunning in her wedding dress, radiant and confident, as if she was about to embark on a new life. As the guests toasted and laughed, Camilla observed from the back of the hall. Her heart was heavy, a turmoil of emotions swirling inside her. With each laugh, each toast, each exchanged look of happiness, the pain of her loss became more unbearable. How could her sister celebrate while the shadow of tragedy still loomed over their lives? Camilla felt a growing anger, an indignation that seemed on the verge of exploding. What was happening at the heart of this celebration was not just an event of joy, but a cloak that concealed dark secrets and open wounds. When the ceremony finally began, Camilla struggled against her emotions. The officiant's words echoed, but she couldn't focus. The sight of Victoria beside Michael, radiant and full of love, was a constant reminder that her life had changed forever. As the ceremony progressed, Camilla made a choice that would lead her to a climax no one could foresee. Suddenly, without warning, Camilla stood up and interrupted the party with a hysterical laugh. The sound resonated through the hall like thunder, drawing everyone's attention. Guests stopped, perplexed, as she stepped forward, an intense look in her eyes. "Excuse me, but I have something important to show," she said, her words slicing through the tense air of the party. She began distributing tablets to some guests, her hand trembling as she handed each one over. "Watch this," she urged, her voice reverberating in a tone that mixed desperation and determination. The lights in the hall gradually dimmed, creating an atmosphere thick with anticipation and nervousness. The guests exchanged confused glances, unsure of what to expect. Camilla positioned herself at the center of the hall, her heart racing as the screen lit up. The video began to play on all the devices simultaneously. It was a recording from the day of the accident, captured by the dashboard camera of Michael's car. Camilla watched familiar images, but her mind was focused on the revelation approaching. The video showed Michael driving, with Logan, their little boy, animatedly chatting. Camilla remembered every word exchanged between them, but what came next made her freeze. "She was fighting with Daddy yesterday," Logan said casually, unaware of the bombshell he had just dropped. Camilla felt her heart race. Michael's face twisted in a moment of concern, and he quickly urged Logan not to say anything more. The video then cut to another angle of the road, and Camilla knew that the revelations were just beginning. The next moment was devastating. Michael's car swerved abruptly, as if an invisible force was pushing it off the road. Camilla could barely breathe as the scene unfolded. The video continued, showing a segment where the car moved erratically, and for a brief moment the view of a detour became clearer. Then, a second video began to play, a recording captured shortly after the accident. The audio showed Logan crying, his small, anguished voice echoing in the room. "She did it, Daddy. I saw," he said, and the revelation was like a punch to Camilla's gut. The silence that followed was heavy, a cloud of tension that seemed to envelop the entire hall. Guests looked at one another, confusion and disbelief etched on their faces. What they were hearing was not just a boy's account, but a heavy accusation that seemed to hang in the air. Now consumed by a primal impulse, Camilla quickly turned to Victoria, her face a mask of pain and indignation. With a scream that pierced the silence, she exclaimed, "He knew. My son saw you arguing with Michael before the accident. You were there. What happened the night before?" The hall fell into a deadly silence, and all eyes turned to Victoria. Shock and disbelief took over the scene. The expression on Victoria's face transformed from joy to bewilderment, a mix of fear and confusion. Camilla realized that, in an instant, all the happiness that surrounded them had been stripped away, revealing the rawness of a dark truth. Victoria began to move toward Camilla, her hands trembling. "Camilla, this isn't what you think. I wasn't there to hurt anyone. What you saw isn't everything." She tried to justify, but her voice trembled, and the words came out disordered, as if she were trapped in a web of lies. But Camilla was not willing to accept excuses. The pain she carried was not only for the loss of her family, but for the betrayal now unfolding before her. "You were there. You know what happened. You can't hide behind a smile forever. My son suffered, and you did nothing to stop it," she shouted, her voice sharp as a blade. As emotions boiled over, the once animated guests found themselves plunged into a visceral conflict they hadn't anticipated. Whispers began to circulate, and the festive atmosphere transformed into a nightmare. Camilla knew that painful truths could no longer be ignored, that the shadow of the past was now haunting her at every corner. Victoria, cornered by the truth, hesitated, her confidence crumbling. "Camilla, please," she pleaded, but her words fell on deaf ears. The thunder of revelation echoed in every corner of the hall, and what should have been a day of celebration had turned into an emotional battlefield. And there, at the center of the scene, as the past and present collided, Camilla's heart was torn between the pain of loss and the determination to expose the truth. What would happen next was not just a fight between sisters, but a battle for the truth that would change their lives forever. The masks were falling, and the consequences of that fateful night were finally about to be revealed. The tension in the air was palpable, and the story that had unfolded for so long was on the brink of reaching its climax, leaving everyone on the edge of an emotional abyss. 6 months had passed since that fateful day, and the town of Springfield seemed to have forgotten the tragedy that had shaken it. The sun shone brightly on the streets, but for Camilla and Victoria, the day's brightness brought no joy as it once had. The consequences of the confrontation at Victoria's wedding loomed like a shadow over their lives, a constant reminder of what had been lost. Victoria, once vibrant and surrounded by friends and admirers, watched her world crumble. The scandal that erupted during her wedding left a trail of destruction. With the revelation of the affair between her and Michael, not only was her social status ruined, but her career suffered as well. She had lost her job, people avoided her, and rumors followed her like a shadow. The parties and social events that once filled her calendar were replaced by awkward silences and disapproving glances. Every corner she turned was a reminder that the trust once placed in her had dissipated, and loneliness was now her only companion. Camilla, on the other hand, faced her own struggles. After months of therapy, she slowly began to rebuild herself, piece by piece, as if trying to reconstruct a broken puzzle. The process was not easy, and memories of Logan haunted her every day. He was the light of her life, and his absence left a void that seemed impossible to fill. However, over time she started to realize that she needed to move on. The pain and resentment she felt toward Victoria were too heavy to carry forever. Meanwhile, the investigation into the accident continued. Authorities, after thorough analyses and interviews, concluded that Michael and Victoria had been having an affair for months. The night before the accident, a new twist revealed itself. Michael had ended the relationship with Victoria in a desperate attempt to save his marriage to Camilla. Enraged and hurt, Victoria went to his house, where they had a heated argument that would echo in their hearts forever. Michael left for the trip with Logan, but before he could drive away completely, Victoria followed him for a few miles. The forensic investigation, after reviewing travel data, concluded that Victoria's interference on the road, though not directly proven, may have contributed to the car's veering off course. However, the evidence was insufficient to charge her with homicide. This conclusion left Camilla in a state of frustration and helplessness. She knew the truth was there, but justice would not reach it. After a period of deep reflection, Camilla decided it was time to leave Springfield. The town, with its painful memories and echoes of her past, could no longer be her home. She said goodbye to the few friends she had left, those who truly understood her pain, and made the decision to start anew in a place where the shadows of the past would not reach her. Deep down, she knew she could not simply erase the memories, but the idea of a new beginning drove her forward. Before leaving, Camilla wrote a letter to Victoria, words she had held on to for months, a mix of anger and sadness, but also a desire for freedom. As she wrote, tears streamed down her face, but she didn't allow herself to stop. "I will never be able to forgive what you did," she began, the words heavy as anchors. "But I need to leave this behind. May the weight of what you chose to bear be punishment enough." With the letter sealed, Camilla felt a momentary relief. It was as if she had freed herself from a burden that consumed her. With one last look at the town she once loved, she said goodbye to the past, opening the doors to an unknown but hopeful future. Victoria, upon reading the letter, felt a wave of guilt and pain. She knew her actions had consequences, and now, with the loss of her sister and Michael's love, it was all that remained. The life she once dreamed of lay in ruins, and the consequences of her choices haunted her like shadows in a dark night. Not knowing how to redeem herself, she found herself trapped in her own prison, eager to change but unsure where to start. The story of Camilla and Victoria intertwined in a tapestry of love, pain, and betrayal, and as each sought her own path, the weight of their decisions would shape them forever. Life, though full of uncertainties, continued to unfold, and both would learn, each in her own way, that truth and redemption do not come easily, but are necessary for growth and healing. And so, under the soft light of the sunset, as Camilla walked away, the town watched her, aware that every story has its consequences, and that ultimately, what truly matters is how we choose to live after the storms pass. Thus, we reach the end of the intense journey of Camilla and Victoria, two sisters whose fates were tragically intertwined by pain and betrayal. What would you do in such a devastating situation? Life is full of choices, and each one can change the course of our stories in ways we never imagined. If you enjoyed this narrative and want to follow more impactful stories, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. We have many other exciting plots waiting for you, with new videos published every week. Join us to explore more storylines filled with twists, mysteries, and emotions. Thank you for following us this far, and until next time.